Hello and welcome back to the County Chat previews for 2025. They're going through the season now. We're going up through the Division 1, going from last to first, and we're up to fourth. It is the perpetual contenders in the last sort of 7 to 8 years, home to Fortress Chelmsford, the ground formerly known as the Ford Motor Company ground or the Cloud FM County ground, but it is now easily coined as the Ambassador Cruise Line ground. It is, of course, Essex, who we'll be looking at today for their preview. And as I say, they're a preview, but we're going into the season with sort of 3 or 4 games in now, but it's kind of just looking on the outset of their squad looking into 2025. Anyway, Essex's leadership group is a very well-established one at this point. We've got Tom Westley as the skipper going into his 6th season, I believe, in that role. So again, he's pretty well-established in that role, and he won the Bob Willis Trophy in 2020 as the captain, and was part of their 2 county championship winning teams in the sort of few years prior to that. Chris Silverwood is within the role as sort of director of cricket and sort of quasi-head coach as well, but he's back at Essex and sort of back where he got his head coaching debut, where he won the county championship in his first year as coach in 2017, and spent a few years there before getting the England role, as people might remember. And obviously he was sort of, he was part of that sort of quite unsuccessful period of England coaching, or England sort of cricket, Test cricket history. But it sort of shows the credentials he has as sort of as a head coach or as a coach just in general. And obviously went on to coach Sri Lanka for a few years. But yeah, as I sort of in short, Essex's brain trust is as consistent, as effective, and has been sort of the same for several years now, and has always had the kind of consistent voices around the group. And it clearly works because they're always at the top of the table. So the leadership group, I would say, is definitely a plus. Again, going into the season, and again, we're sort of in the season a bit now, not looking forward to the season, because beforehand, I think you would have said Essex would have been probably the most surefire prospect for challenging Surrey for the title. Just kind of all the things I mentioned about the leadership group, but also, as we'll get onto later, the kind of talent within their squad and consistency of performers within that team. They'll be looking, they were always going to be looking like one of the best teams to challenge Surrey for this title this year. But they've had a tough start to the season. They've only won 1 game. They beat Worcestershire in a very tight affair on a green seamer at New Road by, I think it was like 27 runs or something like that. So yeah, it's not been a great start for Essex, and it's only going to get a bit more difficult for them, really, because Jordan Cox, who was about to be called into the England squad, scored a brilliant 100 at Taunton, and everyone was very excited for him, and then he retired hurt instantly afterwards, and everyone's minds were cast back to New Zealand, where he broke his hand before his England debut, incredibly unlucky circumstances, and unfortunately a very similar thing has happened. He's got a side strain, so it means obviously he'll be out of action for England, but obviously, of course, that isn't any benefit to Essex, because he will be out of action for them as well. And then on the other side of it is Sam Cook. Sam Cook, who's been long overdue an England call-up. I think if anyone, all the people who watch county championship cricket would have said that for a while. And, so obviously he'll be out of Essex's contention because he's playing for England, and maybe for England all of this summer. I mean, who knows? We'll see how he goes against Zimbabwe in that one-off test, which, we know he'll be playing in. So, yeah, it's been a bad start to the season, and I think it'll put a lot more pressure on sort of other senior performers within the team, whether that be Harmer or Porter. But, yeah, it'll be sort of interesting to see, because that kind of dominant force has been a part of their team. It'll be interesting to see how that sort of progresses on this season, because they're sort of getting on a bit, these sort of great performers for Essex. Anyway, I would say, as we always do, the sort of weaker side of the game and kick it off. I say Essex is probably one of the more obvious weaker sides of the games we've done, and it's not because one's particularly bad, or it's because they have such a sheer quality in their bowling department that I think it's very obvious that the batting would be the weaker side of it. There's maybe teams that I did in Division 2 where I'll be honest, I was struggling to see what was the better side of it, and maybe because both sides of the sort of both departments seemed weak, if that makes sense. Whereas for Essex, it's like both are strong, but the bowling is such a strength, it's quite clearly the batting is a weakness. I don't know if I explained that well, but I think you probably get what I'm getting at. But yeah, I think their bowling sets them apart as a team, and I think that is the reason why they are always within a chance of winning titles, because taking 20 wickets is what wins you games and what's get you to the top of the table. So I think if you have a team that is got seriously good bowling performers, which Essex has always done and has still now, it is a real strength, and it should be sort of the focus of most teams, in my opinion. Anyway, to get onto the batting lineup, to begin the year, it's been a bit of an unfamiliar tone at the top of the lineup because Dean Elgar wasn't available for the first few fixtures, and I don't actually know why, whether or not that was always planned or whether or not it was more of a personal thing. I actually am unsure. But to start the season, it has been a combination of Paul Walter and the youngster Charlie Allison. Because, Paul Walter is not really an opener by trade. I think he had done in the past, but he was more kind of consistently a sort of floater in the lineup. But he's done very well at that position, scored 100, got on very good 95 against Surrey in the first game of the season. So he looks to be really sort of dead on in that second opening spot, because Charlie Allison has struggled a bit more, sort of with the absence of Dean Elgar. Having said that, today they're playing against Yorkshire, just as of recording, and Charlie Allison is the one opening the batting with Dean Elgar, with Paul Walter out of the team. So you never know. It could be just an injury for Walter that is not been sort of spoken of, but it'd be interesting. Maybe they're just trying to they really see some talent in Charlie Allison and really trying to just breed him through this season and get him into being one of the really talented players that Essex often produce, and they have done in the past. But anyway, getting on to Dean Elgar, I think personally he's been someone I've really been enjoying rooting for in many ways since he's gone into the county cricket game, because I think it's one of the most satisfying signings. He signed a 3-year contract at the start of last season, kind of following the retirement of Sir Alistair Cook. Obviously sort of Essex and England great left-handed opener, and it was a perfect kind of like-for-like signing. Dean Elgar had just retired for South Africa. He's sort of first-class cricket great. Like, he hasn't really played much white ball stuff. He's one of those that kind of a bit of a vintage, a kind of a unique thing you don't see in the modern game very often. And I love Dean Elgar. I think anyone who's a big cricket fan sort of loves how he captained South Africa and always sort of brought a very positive spin on cricket, I would say. I've always been a fan of his. Anyway, but him replacing sort of lefty for lefty as well, opener for opener, and sort of red ball specialist for red ball specialist, I really sort of enjoyed in a sort of cricket nerdy way somehow. And yeah, in his first season, he showed it was sort of a really good signing as well, because he led the team for Essex with 1,144 runs at an average of 57. So yeah, I mean, he's got the talent to really, really lead this batting lineup, and I think he might need to, with the sort of the absence of Jordan Cox, as we'll get onto later. Anyway, Essex also for the sort of opening spot, which they haven't used at the start of the season, which surprised me, was sort of Alistair Cook, Chef's usual opening partner, in Nick Brown. He's sort of proven run scorer. I think he scored like 7,600 runs, and he's not overly getting too old. I think he's 33 or 34, so it was an interesting one. They haven't picked him, but maybe that just shows where Essex are at, and they're trying to play a lot of more youngsters. But I think, whether it be a loan or whether or not, I don't know when his contract runs out, but it's sort of a really, I think it would be a good pickup for a lot of counties around the country, Nick Brown. So yeah, be interesting to see how his season kind of goes. And as much as sort of going off from the openers, as much as the openers would have been a question mark for selectors in the first few games, number 3 couldn't have been more sort of set in stone, if you will. It's the skipper who plays there. Consistent presence at 3 is Tom Westley. I think for me, Wesley is one of the sort of best players to watch when he's in his full flow. He's very satisfying, really eye-catching, really easy on the eye. And yeah, his leg side game, I think if you've watched Tom Westley bat and remember his kind of brief cameo for England when he got selected in sort of 2017-18, I think it was particularly eye-catching. He has really good wrists and really beautifully effective run scorer. I think he's one of those players who you can really pencil in for sort of a run, scoring about 700 to 1,000 runs a season, kind of often is available. And I think, at 3, having someone who is that consistent, I think is a real benefit. It feels like it's a calming presence. If you lose an early one, Tom Wesley's coming in and he's going to get a good start possibly. Anyway, in at 4, obviously as late has been held down by the sort of extremely talented Jordan Cox. He hadn't been wicket keeping this season so far because of his broken thumb suffered in New Zealand. And yeah, he's either way, it was not going to be the case. He was going to be staying at 4 for Essex, obviously. But yeah, with that 100, as I've mentioned at Taunton, he got a side strain. So he will be sort of, he'll be ruining, his injury luck he's had in the sort of last 9 months, I guess you'd say. To give Cox his sort of flowers, I guess you'd say, over recent years, he's stood out amongst wicket keepers and batters in England, and I think there's a huge amount of competition. I think it's probably the area of England cricket we've got the best depth, with players like Ollie Robinson, Jamie Smith, Ben Foakes, but Jordan Cox has really stood up alongside them. And again, I think side strains are annoying injuries. They always take a lot longer to heal than you'd sort of expect for such a what feels like a minor injury. But I think for a batter especially, you'll definitely be able to come back later in the season, and maybe because he's getting injured, he won't go straight back into the England side. So that might help Essex in a sort of weird roundabout way nearer the end of the season. Anyway, after Cox in the lineup, I think he's he's a really talented cricketer. I'm really big fan of his. It's batting all-rounder Matt Critchley. I think he's a really valuable option for Essex, and I think he's really fit into the team since joining from, I think it's Derbyshire about 3 or 4 years ago, because he's got a secondary spin option, which we'll get onto obviously on the bowling side of it. Anyway, but last year he scored 662 runs with bat at averaging 36. That is a higher batting average than his career, which again, from watching him bat, kind of is a surprise to me in many ways. I think his batting talent is of a higher level than that, and I think it will be interesting to see this year. He started off the season as well as he could, really, with 145 not out against Surrey. So it'll be interesting, as I say, it'll be going to be interesting to see what Matt Critchley's role is, especially with the absence of Jordan Cox now. I think he might be one of the players that Essex really hope or need to sort of step up and have a season closer to 1,000 runs to really put Essex within, and this is within the realms of maybe challenging for a title. I think that would be need to be the case if that happened. So as I say, with Cox playing as purely as a batter, Michael Pepper has been the consistent glover this year. I think that will continue throughout the season, again due to sort of Jordan Cox's more recent injury. But Pepper had a breakout year last year, scoring only 523 runs, but it was at an average of 43, and he didn't play in all of the games. He scored 2 of his 3 first-class hundreds, and the third one came this year, so he sort of had his sort of breakout as good as it gets really for last season. Pepper is kind of that kind of classical counter-attacking wicketkeeper, I guess, shaped in the mould of Adam Gilchrist, who people often talk about sort of changing the face of the wicketkeeper batsman. And he fits within that mould of sort of it's more of aggressive. He's a very good white ball player. I think he's got the talent. I think he's good enough. He'll have another good year with the bat. I think Essex are one of those really great talent identification counties where they just consistently, if they see someone they like, a young player, they'll just happily keep playing them. So whether that's the same with Charlie Allison and Noah Thane, who we'll get onto. There is good level of cover if Pepper got injured or really fell out of form with Adam Rossington. I think in my head Adam Rossington would be a bit older than he is. I think he's only 32, and he's had a very good career, and is kind of shaped very much in the mould of Michael Pepper, in the sense of he's an aggressive counter-attacking wicketkeeper batsman who can hit the ball a long way. He's a white ball specialist in many ways. So again, if Pepper does falter or if Pepper gets injured, it will be interesting to see if Rossington will be the one they could have called to step up into that role. Highly talented all-rounder Noah Thane has been a consistent part of Essex's team this season. I think, again, if I was doing this before the season, I may not have suggested that, but I think they've really backed him, and I think that's a great thing for him as a young cricketer. As I've written here, Thane is He's a player who was impressed in second 11 cricket for a while. I think if you checked his sort of second 11 stats, which I can't say I have, but I remember seeing a lot of scores he's got and wickets he's taken, and it's quite an impressive, dominating thing. I also remember he was very impressive as an England under-19, I think that was maybe 2 years ago now, or a year ago now. As I've written here, is Essex's talent identification, and as I just mentioned, is they really rarely falter. I feel like often when they put their weight in someone, they usually come off. Again, it's not always the case, but he's looked the part so far in this season. He's not really had like a big score or a big wicket-taking performance to show it. I mean, he's not been bad by any means. So it'll be interesting to see if they kind of go with a full season of Thane and just think we're going to back you and sort of hope and know you'll provide us some goods near the end of the season or throughout the season, really. Anyway, Shane Snater is a sort of, I guess you'd call him a bowler, but I think he falls into the bowling all-rounder. At least last season he had a season which would be called a bowling all-rounder, I would say, because he averaged over 30 with 350s and did very well, and that was him playing in all of the games, I think, almost. So he will provide some important runs near the bottom of the lineup. And Simon Harmer, he had a bad year with the bat last year, but he does have two first class hundreds to his name and an average of well above 20. So I think he's someone you're worth mentioning when you're talking about bowlers you can bat. Anyway, on to the bowling, which is, again, the clear strength, I think, for Essex. And yeah, I just get onto the sort of the obvious thing. They have to me and to my eyes, the best opening duo in the country, and they have done for the last 5 or 6 years. Sam Cook and Jamie Porter. We'll start with Sam Cook. Again, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is recently selected for England. And I think, county championship fans will probably have been united in the fact of, over the last 5 years, you could have got blue in the face talking about how good Sam Cook is and how great his numbers are. He's taken 321 wickets at an average of under 20, and it's kind of consistently been under 20. Last year, he took 43 wickets at an average of 17, so just consistent with that dominance he's shown in English conditions. And again, it was finally the sort of catalyst for him was he went on this England Lions tour over the winter to Australia, and he was just so far ahead of all the other England Lions bowlers picked, and not the other bowlers who were very talented bowlers, but a lot of them were sort of picked for those sort of physical attributes, the fast bowling, and all of the things that England are liking for fast bowlers before they go to Australia. And Sam Cook is sort of none of those things. He bowls into the sort of high 70s, low 80s, and just his unbelievably skillful, can keep it in a very well controlled. And guess what? He did so much better than any other of the England fast bowlers against very good batting lineups. And it looks like that has kind of been the catalyst for his England selection in that one-off test against Zimbabwe. As an England fan, I kind of hope this will be the beginning of his consistent place within the team, especially as it looks like England have gone off Ollie Robinson. Because I think they kind of fit the sort of same mould of kind of controlled bowler who averages in the low 20s or high teens for Sam Cook's case. Essex faithful, who are, the Essex I do have a very strong sort of fan base, will maybe hope that he falters for England and they don't like him for the rest of the season, and then he can play for Essex all summer. But as an England fan, I think I'm kind of hoping he kind of has a full summer of Test cricket, because I think he's well good enough to do it and has consistently proven it. I mean, 320 wickets is nothing to sniff at. I mean, he's 26, I think. So it's that many wickets at that young of an age is a very impressive thing. Anyway, going on to his sort of really, really talented fast bowling duo, I think, as I've written it, on any other team, Jamie Porter would be the standout bowler. It wouldn't even be that close. I mean, a career bowling average of 23, taking 539 wickets. He's 31. Jamie Porter, he's not a particularly old bowler who's been around for a long time. There's a lot of bowlers a lot older than him who have a lot less first-class wickets, to be clear. And, he led the league in wickets last year with 56, and he's easily, as I say, he was a 31-year-old. He's easily, young enough to keep on being laden with this heavy workload that he's had over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, especially now, obviously, with Sam Cook dropping out. I think, putting it simply, Jamie Porter would have been a great performer for England in the late 2010s and early 2020s. Had two blokes not named Broad and Anderson sort of consistently disproved the usual wisdom of the ageing curve. Cook and Porter, as good as it gets as an opening duo, and I think Jamie Porter, as I say, I think he's just one of those people who was unlucky with the sort of era he was in. He's never got a test call-up. He's played for the England Lions. I mean, whether or not I think maybe because of his age he's beyond a test call-up, I think wouldn't be fair for me personally, I would say. But, he is a seriously talented bowler, and I think he will need all of that talent if Sam Cook is in the Essex, in the England side all summer. Anyway, but yeah, again, as a fan of fast bowling, those two opening the bowling together and watching them bowl, it can be, poetry in motion. It's beautiful to watch, I think, often. So, as I say, long may it continue, only not against Sussex. But, Shane, and so going on to the sort of the change bowlers, who I think, again, with Sam Cook being in the England side, will be even more important. Shane Snater, in recent years, has been the perfect sort of third seamer to follow those two up. I think he's easily good enough to be more of a premier quick, more of an opening bowler, which I think he will be within this Essex team. Now Sam Cook's got into the England squad. And his last season proves that talent. He took 41 wickets at an average of 22. I think he's really shown himself to be a quality performer, the Dutch international, he just fits that Essex sort of mould very well. Long may it continue for Essex's point of view. For not much longer, though, they will have the services of Kasun Rajitha. He played under Silverwood for Sri Lanka, and they really liked the skills he had for maybe early season in England. He signed a deal for 5 matches, so I think this is his last match going on today against Yorkshire. And he's taken 8 wickets at 28, so nothing to sort of go crazy about, but he's clearly shown his talents. Obviously Essex will kind of need people to fill in where he leaves off, or whether or not, because of Sam Cook being picked up, they'll look for another international option to sort of fill in for Kasun Rajitha. Noah Thane, as I mentioned a bit earlier with the batting, he's sort of a bowling all-rounder, I think, really. So, maybe when Rajitha leaves and Cook goes off into international duty, Thane will maybe be put on a bit more of a heavy bowling duty, and we'll see if he has an increased bowling workload. It'll be interesting to see how Thane does with that kind of increased responsibility, I guess, rather than being a 5th or 4th seamer. Jamal Richards, who went off on a sort of 2-week loan at Kent, is another young bowler who they might see as a sort of someone who he'll come into the lineup more with Sam Cook playing for England and Rajitha going back to Sri Lanka. It'll be interesting to see again. Another really talented player. He looked very good for Kent, but youngsters, it's all about just playing them, and sometimes you just have a performance out of nowhere, and it'll be interesting to see if he gets those sort of chances, I guess, simply put. For the spin bowling, I think it's safe. It's a simple way of putting it is the spin bowling is about as good as the pace bowling, which I think usually in the English setup is not the case. I think you often have teams who are very good seam bowlers, but there's not really a spinner of note. And a massive part of that, obviously, is Simon Harmer. I think he has been I think his signing in 2017 was probably the biggest catalyst for them going from being a good team to the best team in England. He took I think he went as high as 70 wickets in one of those seasons, which is just, eye-watering. Usually 50 wickets is kind of a big deal. So it shows how much of a performer he is for Essex, and he has been over the sort of past several years. Again, that sort of 7 to 8 year period that I've been mentioning. Harmer is within the 900s of first-class wickets. He's sort of creeping toward the 1,000 first-class wickets. I don't know if he'll get there this season, but that, again, it just proves how big of a deal he is and how many wickets he's taken, because he is, now, especially in the modern era, people going past the 1,000 first-class wickets is coming but rarer and rarer, and I think he will obviously go past it. He's now, Harmer, his sort of talent and his abilities is been proven by the fact that in his mid-30s he's become a part of this South African team that has done incredibly well, and it's propelled itself all the way to the World Test Championship final. So I think Simon Harmer is one of those players who, he's just a consistent performer. I've used that phrase a lot with these Essex players, but I think he's no other way of putting it. You know what you're going to get. He's going to bowl a hell of a lot of overs at Chelmsford, which is often a spinning pitch. Last year he took 45 wickets at a bit of an elevated average of 33 compared to his career mark of around 26. I guess Essex will hope that's a bit of a blip and not maybe a bit of a sign that that he is 36 and the age regression sort of chart is against him. But in my opinion, I think Harmer is still as the best it gets as it comes to spinners in the county championship and the county champ. I really can't think of it. I mean, Jack Leach, I think, is probably the one maybe who would be against him. You'd put against him, but I think Harmer probably, for just maybe you just say for legacy purposes, is probably still the one I'd say is the best. I mean, of course, he would have taken it quite heavy. The performance at Somerset, Taunton is kind of famously one of the most spinning grounds in the country. And James Rue, who we'll mention in the Somerset preview, scored a brilliant 100, and Craig Overton scored a sort of a really great 50 on the way for Somerset, chasing sort of something in the low 300s on a day 4 pitch. As I've written here, I'm sure that will irk him. But yeah, as long as I've watched county cricket, Harmer has been the business, and I don't see it changing in this next season. Again, it might be a case that next season I'll have to change my mind on that, because again, he will be getting into being 37, and whether or not he'll have a good season this season, we'll see. But I think he's still getting the revs on the ball. I don't think there's anything I'm seeing in him when he's bowling where I'm noticing maybe a bad sign, if you were to put it that way. But yeah, as I mentioned when I was talking about him in the batting sort of aspects, it's Matt Critchley has kind of been a perfect partner for Simon Harmer. Is sort of a leg spin equivalent. Obviously more of a part-time bowler, but he definitely falls within the realms of, I say, batting all-rounder. Because last year he took 34 wickets, which I think for a lot of bowlers is a great season, at an average of around 30 or just over 30, I think. These numbers are far better than his career numbers. I think his bowling averages is sort of in the high 30s for his career. And I think it sort of follows the logic that he's been playing with Harmer for a period of time. So he's probably been learning some of the sort of spin bowling, guile and control, and maybe even sort of stuff like fields and all of that kind of stuff. But also I think, often spin bowlers in really spinning pitches are bowling in pairs. And I think when you've got someone like Harmer at the other end who's super controlled, it can help a leg spinner especially who might go for a few runs, but you don't have to worry as much because maybe, Harmer at the other end is just dotting them up. And I think he's probably got more wickets over the course of the last few years because of the kind of control at the other end. And whether or not that be Critchley bowling also with Porter and Cook, because I think, and Snater, I think they can all do the same thing. And that is just why I think this Essex lineup is just so good, is that there's all of them are wicket-taking options, but all of them are control options as well, which is, I think, a really rare thing within any bowling lineup. So yeah, simply put, I think Essex have got one of the best bowling units in the country. I think maybe I don't know if I was to stack them all up against each other, I think it'd be difficult, but I think he would probably be right up there. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the bowling lineup sort of does throughout this season. Anyway, overall, Essex's bowling lineup, I think, always puts them within a shout of success within any season. Of course, the selection of Sam Cook, as I've been mentioning, is going to put a bit of a spanner in the works. But I guess, Essex probably would have been seeing this coming at some point. I think they know just how good he's been and the fact that he's been a big part of the England Lions in the sort of last year and a half, 2 years. So yeah, again, it puts them in an unprecedented place because, as I was mentioning, Sam Cook is, despite being the sort of standout option, hasn't bowled for England yet. So I think it'd be interesting to see how Essex going to react to that. And obviously Jamie Porter, I think, will have to step up as the leader of the bowling, the seam bowling attack. And they'll need sort of fringe fast bowlers, Thane and Richards, and whether or not, again, they're going to kind of look to take anyone in from the outside. It will be interesting to see, who kind of steps up to fill in, say Snater becomes your second seamer, who becomes your third and fourth seamers, and I think that'll be the really interesting thing. As I mentioned, the spin bowling, I think, is of a level, and Harmer, I think, is of a level, and Critchley are of a level. They'll always be picked, and I think on a good spinning pitch, I think they are as good of a sort of duo act, if you will, as it probably gets in the country, other than, again, maybe Somerset, who we'll get onto in the next preview. I think, going on to their back to their batting, obviously because it was the first thing we covered, I think their batting is a sort of a solid standard. I think they use an American phrase of where their floor is. Where if everything went wrong, where would their floor be? I think it's still not that low because I think there's a lot of people who are just, as I say, with Wesley and Critchley, Elgar. I think you're going to get runs with them. I think it's just interesting to see, if any one of those can go on to score massive, especially someone like Critchley, I think will be a really big part of if they can compete for a title. I think maybe there's some consistent performers within there, but again, Pepper as well, Thane, if they can get some, runs, 600, 700 runs, I think it'll be really interesting because they'll be putting their bowling lineup within the chances to win, I guess. And again, I think I've written here, I think they need someone to have like a career year. I think Elgar will probably get you in and around 1,000 runs this season. I mean, in a few less games, so maybe not 1,000 runs, but he'll probably average above 50. It's just a case of whether or not the other batters around him, someone like Wesley, can just have a massive year. I think he hasn't had a big year in a while, and I think he'll be really, wanting that and wanting to get into some really good form. So yeah, again, it's an interesting one. I think the batting is of a standard, so I think it leaves the bowling to be their emphasis, and the bowling is their emphasis. I think it always has been. So it will be interesting, again, to sort of see how that all pans out. But yeah, I think the sort of spin bowling of Harmer is always key. I think if he has a really big year, Essex will be in and around the title charge because he can just take so many wickets on his own, and especially the start of the season has been as dry as the start of a season as I can remember, and dry pitches lead to spinning pitches usually. So if this continues, this sort of weather we've had in the UK, someone like Harmer will be incredibly sort of licking his lips, if you will, incredibly interested to see how the pitches will be looking come nearer the end of season, whilst they've been worn and used a lot. Again, I think Noah Thane is a player to look out for. I think it looks like how Essex are just viewing him as like a sort of freebie. He's sort of their 5th or 4th seamer and their sort of 6th or 7th batter. And I think he'll be looking to make a name for himself. I think I've heard a lot about him just through cricketing circles. I think a lot of people talk about him like, with big sort of shoes to fill. Not shoes to fill, but kind of big... what's the word? Lofty ambitions for what this player could be. So again, maybe he'll have a big push and all of a sudden he'll be a big reason part of Essex's title charge this season. Again, I think they'll need more, to rely on their depth more because of Sam Cook, because of Jordan Cox, as we've mentioned a lot, and that they need to fill those 2 gaps within their lineup now. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Essex do. I think they're, as I say, they're a well-run side. I don't think they'll give away games much, and I think they'll be in and around the top half of the table. So it'll be interesting to see where they end up. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and listening. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, give it a like, leave a comment if you've got anything you disagree with or agree with. Obviously, there'll be some previews from my previous teams. If you've missed any of those, looking at the various teams, we've only got 3 left. It's Somerset, Hampshire, and of course the title holders in Surrey. So yeah, we'll be looking at those in the kind of coming week and seeing how they'll be going. Anyway, so thank you very much for watching, and remember to subscribe to the County Chat. Thank you very much. Cheers.